I created G-plans out of nutrition frustration. One day during nutrition studies at Duke University, we came across a revelation. We discovered that everyone has a completely unique metabolic structure and type. Eating a generic diet program will not get you the results you want, and you will continue on a path of yo-yo dieting forever. Ultimately, sustainable food programs are built within your own specific metabolic template.
I eat what Dr. G tells me to eat for my metabolic type. I don't call this program a diet because I eat more than on other programs.
Hello and welcome to today's nutrition masterclass. So glad you're here with me today. I see a few familiar names here already, which is awesome to see. Connie, Scott, it's great to see you again. I see Rebecca, Joanne as well. And thank y'all for chiming in. Sounds like y'all had some fun plans over the weekend. Rebecca was doing some arts and crafts for a Girl Scout camp. That sounds so fun. I'm used to be a Girl Scout as well. Sounds super fun. Joanne said an Indiana Jones movie. That's awesome. I haven't seen an Indiana Jones movie in a while and love them. So I need to watch one of those again. And then Scott says he had a visit with his brother and wife. Sounds good. All right. Well, hope everyone had a wonderful 4th. And again, this is today's Nutrition Masterclass. Of course, we're live every Wednesday at 12 Pacific time with a new topic. My name is Savannah, and today what we're going to be discussing is some reasons why you might choose to reduce or eliminate either dairy or gluten as a whole. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, why you might want to do that, a couple different reasons, and some things to look for that might kind of indicate you might want to try to reduce or eliminate those. So we're about to get started here and dive right into our presentation. Okay, so I'm seeing some audio issues. Is everybody able to hear me right now, or you still having some issues hearing? I see Joanne said she couldn't hear, and Connie as well. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Well, okay. All right, Connie, I'm sorry about that. Connie and Joanne, I'm not sure. I'm hearing from Rhonda here. She can't hear me. Okay. I'm not sure why you might be having some issues with the audio. So wanted to double check there. Okay, great. We're good to go. Awesome. Thank y'all for letting me know. I've had issues with audio in the past, so I want to make sure everybody can hear and we are good before we get started. So we'll dive right in. As a reminder today, please feel free, if you have any questions, go ahead and add those in the chat box. So at the end of today's presentation, I will take those questions and love to have a little conversation with you. So we'll dive right in here. All right, so today's topic is, should you eliminate dairy and gluten? Okay, so this is our overview, our table of contents today. We're going to talk a little bit first of some reasons, of course, why you might choose to eliminate dairy or gluten. Next up, we're going to go over one first big reason for that is food allergies and sensitivities. Next, I'm going to ask a little question from you. Are you curious? Are you curious if eliminating gluten and dairy is right for you? Maybe that's something you've already done. I'd love to hear a little feedback from you. Next up, we're going to discuss inflammation as another reason you might choose to reduce or cut out dairy and gluten. And we're going to talk a little more of how you can do that, some good steps to take. And then we'll close everything out with my tip of the week. Okay. All right, so always as a reminder, You can feel free, add any questions in the chat box today, but if you'd like to reach out to me personally instead, feel free to send me an email. My email's there on the screen, and this will also be added in the chat box for you today as well. Oh, whoop. Okay, so email there on the screen. That went by a little fast, but again, that will be in the chat box for you also. Okay. All right. So, what are some reasons why might you choose to reduce or maybe cut out entirely dairy and gluten? There are many reasons you might choose to do so. They're both, again, going to be very common food intolerances. They can definitely contribute to some different digestive issues, and you might also find that you feel some relief from allergies, again, sensitivities, or inflammatory conditions by avoiding these foods in particular. So lots of different reasons there. Today we're also going to discuss why you might choose to cut those out and how they can contribute to certain symptoms and inflammation as well. So with that being said, we're going to dive right in and get started. So again, feel free, any questions you might have, go ahead and add those in our chat box today. Okay, yes, so first things first, when it comes to dairy and gluten, the primary reasons you're going to want to remove those from your diet, it's going to be food allergies and then food sensitivities or intolerances. So number one, what's kind of the difference between those? First, food allergies, these are going to be a little different. I'm also grouping in here celiac disease, which is not an allergy, but if you do have celiac disease, you have an autoimmune response when you consume foods that contain gluten. This does mean that your body can truly not tolerate gluten. In individuals that do have celiac disease, gluten intolerance, or wheat allergies, consuming gluten can lead to something called leaky gut. Leaky gut, it impairs the lining of your intestine, which causes more digestive issues and inflammation. So for these people, if you have celiac disease, if you do have a specific wheat allergy, or you're very intolerant to gluten items, you definitely want to completely avoid those for sure. Again, leaky gut is something where that lining of your intestine can open up in a sense, and contents of your digestive system can leak into the rest of your body, which causes this inflammatory response. So that is something you definitely want to completely avoid gluten in those scenarios. Next up is if you have a milk allergy. So of course that's a big one too for dairy. If you know you are truly have an allergy to milk and you have an allergic response, this could be to, again, the components of milk, either whey or casein. You might experience things like hives, itching, swelling of the lips, mouth, these kind of things. You absolutely for sure need to avoid all forms of dairy entirely. Now, food sensitivities and intolerances, they of course are a little bit different. A milder form of gluten intolerance is known as non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and this can cause symptoms of bloating, diarrhea, stomach pain, headaches, and fatigue. So this is one too, again, with intolerances, with sensitivities, they can also be sometimes a little trickier to narrow down because with an allergy, you might eat a food and you instantaneously have that allergic response. Now with sensitivities and intolerances, you could eat a food and have a more delayed response that doesn't really let you know that it was that food that was aggravating you in particular. So, want to really pay attention to that. Notice when you might have digestive issues. Lactose intolerance as well is a more common condition where you do have an impaired ability to digest lactose, which also can result in digestive issues as well. So the good thing, of course, with lactose intolerance is you still can have some forms of dairy that do not contain lactose or as much lactose. But again, these allergies, sensitivities, these are going to be a little different. Another thing I wanted to note as well is with food allergy or sensitivity testing, this can be a little tricky too. So with IgE testing, when this is done, you can often maybe see a false positive. So the way these tests are done is if there's a food you were tested for and it's something you eat pretty frequently, it could actually cause kind of a positive, false positive test result for you. So can be a little tricky to narrow these things down, and we're going to talk a little more about some ways you can really pay attention to how your body is responding to various foods in just a little bit. All right, so at this time, I'd love to hear from you a little bit. Let me know, are you curious if eliminating dairy and gluten is right for you? Is this something that you've tried to do in the past? Did you have any issues with it? Do you have any questions about this in general I could help with? Please feel free to add those in the chat box, and I'd love to take those at the end of our presentation today. Whoa, okay. All right. So next reason why you might want to cut out or reduce dairy and gluten, it's going to be inflammation. Research points to gluten and dairy's role in promoting inflammation in the body. Symptoms of certain inflammatory conditions may be mitigated by following a gluten and dairy-free diet. Studies have shown positive benefits by eliminating gluten and dairy when it comes to certain conditions in particular. A reduction in severity of symptoms has been noticed when cutting out gluten and dairy, in particularly rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's thyroid, and irritable bowel syndrome. So that's been well studied and shown that cutting out gluten and dairy could definitely give you a reduction in symptoms, for those conditions and possibly many more other inflammatory related conditions. There's also another part of the population where you might experience less severe reactions or maybe none at all. You might also consider reducing your exposure to gluten and dairy while focusing on weight loss, as it can cause unwanted inflammation, and then that increased inflammation is definitely going to make it more of a challenge to lose weight. So we covered this a couple weeks ago on Nutrition Masterclass here. We went over inflammation as it relates to weight loss, and so it definitely can affect your progress. So one thing you might consider is progress has been slow. If you know you have an inflammatory condition, first and foremost, cutting out gluten and dairy is probably a really good idea. Next is maybe your progress has been a little bit slower, or maybe you have a little bit of digestive issues, little symptoms here and there. You might consider cutting out dairy and gluten just to see how your body responds from there. Okay, so what do you do? How do you reduce or eliminate gluten and dairy in your diet? First things first, I say keep a food diary. So you may be tracking your food intake, and that's excellent. Taking things a little step further and doing a food diary is an excellent way to kind of keep track and learn of how you're responding to different foods in your diet. Again, tracking your food, super helpful, but keeping that food journal, it's going to help you to log when you're feeling certain digestive issues, when you're feeling certain ways, and it's going to help you kind of connect the dots there to where you might know when you might notice certain symptoms and if they're connected to a certain food in your diet that way. Another way to do this is also to try an elimination diet. So again, if you feel like you might have some inflammation, if you have an inflammatory condition, you might try to just go ahead and eliminate gluten and dairy. Try that out for a few weeks at a time. So at least probably about 4 weeks would be ideal to remove them entirely. And what you're going to want to pay attention to is, okay, did those digestive issues, some of these symptoms I had, have they lessened? Have they gone away? So that's going to help you to really indicate and know if you should reduce those. The next step after eliminating those foods is to slowly add one by one back in. So again, you'll cut them out for about 4 weeks at a time. Try to incorporate maybe one small serving of dairy or one small serving of something that did contain gluten, one at a time. And this is going to help you to see after that elimination period how your body responds to those foods. And again, you might notice, you might find you don't have a great reaction. And that's a good indicator you need to continue to stay away from those foods over the long term. Next up is, again, find those healthy alternatives. There's going to be plenty of options out there for you. Cutting out gluten and dairy truly does not have to be challenging. If you are a G-Plans member already, our plans do not, of course, they don't include dairy and contain many gluten-free choices as well. Some little options here that might be helpful is rather than regular bread, you might choose gluten-free or a sprouted grain option. So sprouted grain's a little different. Of course, that does still contain gluten. So for someone that has a true gluten allergy, for someone that has celiac disease, you're not going to want to do the sprouted bread. However, if you just have a sensitivity, the sprouted grain bread, it's going to be a little easier for you to digest and absorb, and typically you might be fine with that option. In addition to that, when sticking gluten-free, stick to those whole food carbohydrate sources, things like sweet potatoes or rice. And then there's also many dairy-free options, of course, on the market today that are great. You are going to want to keep in mind to stick to more unsweetened milk alternatives. So if you're looking for oat milk, coconut milk, almond milk, go ahead and stick to, again, that unsweetened choice. And then lastly, remember, if you are lactose intolerant, I know sometimes we may avoid dairy entirely, and again, nothing wrong with that. However, important to keep in mind that protein powder, for example, as a whole, if you're lactose intolerant, you might find you're still able to incorporate things like certain yogurts, protein powders, things that are lactose free or much lower in lactose as well. All right, and so last thing here, it is my tip of the week. Sounds pretty simple, but I want to stress this is portion sizes. When we start with a plan, very often we're very diligent, very focused on making sure we are tracking everything very well, we're portioning out everything perfectly. And then after a while, we might notice maybe our progress slowing down, and that can sometimes be connected to getting a little too comfortable or not sticking to your appropriate portion sizes as you were in the beginning of your plan. when, again, you have been following plan for a while, you might start kind of eyeballing those portions, maybe instead of measuring them more accurately, or you might kind of slowly let those portions increase. This can actually contribute and lead to what may look like a plateau in your weight loss progress. It's helpful to check in regularly with yourself. Another great way to do this, again, that food journal that I mentioned, having a journal, having something like that where you can also do regular check-ins with yourself is so helpful. Do those check-ins and ensure that you are following your plan the same way that you did when you started. Small changes like a little increase in portion size may not seem like a big deal, but if your portion's slipping a little bit larger at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, over time, this is definitely enough to put a dent in your progress. So again, use that food journal, use that journal, that diary you have, and do those little check-ins with yourself. Make sure as time goes on with your plan that you're staying as focused as you were when you got started. All right, and this does bring me today to the end of today's presentation. So if you have any other questions you'd like to add in the chat box at this time, please feel free to do so. Okay. All right. I'm going to pull up your questions here. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's see here. Rebecca said, yeah, she's been looking for some more gluten and dairy-free options. We definitely have, if you're talking about on G plans, we have quite a few good options there. When it comes to recipes, you can look for gluten-free, and then we also have of course, when you're swapping ingredients, if you see a recipe on your plan that is not gluten-free, of course, you can still typically make that gluten-free by swapping out a couple ingredients. And the app's going to help you to do that too, giving some suggestions for different options you can add in there also. Rhonda here says, I have hypothyroid, some ulcers, and gastroparesis. What to eat and what not to eat is a huge question mark. Would this help me? Absolutely, Rhonda. I would say, so first and foremost, it would probably be a really good idea for you to consider working with a nutritionist. That's what I would suggest first, especially if you have a couple things going on. We would love to talk with you a little more individually and really ensure that we have the best plan for you and the best foods on that plan as well. However, definitely encourage it. Removing them, trying to do maybe a little bit of an elimination diet like I mentioned, and using a food journal would definitely be a good way to determine if you might find some benefit from removing those. So again, yeah, you might choose to go ahead and cut them out for maybe about 4 weeks. And then at the end of that 4 weeks, you want to incorporate a small portion of, say, a dairy food or a food containing gluten and see how you respond. But again, I would definitely suggest to work with a nutritionist, and feel free to email me about that as well if you have some more questions. All right. Tom said he does have some digestive issues going on. Yes, that could absolutely potentially be caused from dairy. But again, digestive issues are also a tricky one because they can be caused by a lot of different reasons. So it's hard to narrow down just individually. However, again, if you would like to have a nutritionist look a little more one-on-one in your current diet and kind of look at your routine, see what changes we could make, please feel free. Send me an email. We'd love to hook you up and get you set up that way. All right. Scott says, I don't have any food allergies. I stick to small portions. And yes, Scott, you got it. If you do tolerate dairy well, dairy is an excellent food to include in your diet. There is nothing wrong with dairy. However, it can be a very big common allergen and common food to have an intolerance to. So for those reasons, that's why we're talking about a lot of people might see some benefit in reducing or eliminating. There is a lot more, so on that note, there's a lot more details today too as well when it comes to gluten and it comes to dairy, the reasons why these foods cause inflammation. And a lot of that can kind of go back to the way we are producing food today and different things in our food supply also. So a lot of details there, but long story short, if you find that you tolerate dairy or gluten well, there is no reason that you need to really eliminate that. Of course, trying an elimination diet to see if you might have a benefit from that is always worth a shot if that's something you're interested in. But again, if you find you tolerate those well, feel free to still have those. Okay. Oh yeah, Rebecca said products available for gluten and dairy, they have improved tremendously since earlier 2000s. You got it for sure. I myself as well, probably about the same time, early 2000s, I remember I began kind of going on a gluten-free diet years ago, and totally different than the way it is today. You really couldn't find any products on the market that were gluten-free. Now today, there's a lot of products that are labeled gluten-free and lots of dairy-free choices as well. One thing though to keep in mind with that being said is, again, you're going to want to always prioritize whole foods. So there's a lot of more processed foods that are still gluten-free, that are dairy-free, and a lot of these choices may not really be very healthy options as well. So also look at those labels. Again, stick to those whole food choices first, and then if you're looking at an item, if it has that gluten-free kind of right there on the front, could be a little bit of a marketing thing. So you always want to look at that food label. You want to know exactly what that nutrition looks like. Okay. Oh, and it's great to see Alex here. Good to see you there. All right. Scott says, yes, it's totally right. Scott said here, no one knows your body better than you, so pay attention to your body. I absolutely love that, for sure. So that's going back to what he said earlier. He tolerates dairy well and incorporates it. So again, doing an elimination diet, adding these foods back in, doing a food journal. These are things that are going to help you to learn more about your body and how you respond to those different foods. And again, that's so important to know what works best for you. I will say on that too, again, if you want a little extra guidance, a little extra help in that, we have a team of nutritionists here at G Plans also that would love to help you work through that and build the best plan for you. Okay. And then Melanie, have some good questions here, a little related to kind of your plan at G Plans. Feel free, I can get back to you a little more personally on that. Feel free to send me an email on those questions, and I will get right back to you. All right. Well, that's about all the time I have for today. I'm so glad to see y'all here, and I hope this was a helpful topic. Again, I love what Scott said. No one knows your body better than you do. So again, use those food journals. And also, again, feel free to reach out. Send me an email if you have some questions. If you'd like to sit down and work with a nutritionist, kind of learn more about what works best for you. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And keep in mind, I'm always here every Wednesday at 12 Pacific Standard Time. We'll have a new topic, and I'm always here to also answer any questions you have. So please come back next week. I'll be here on Wednesday at 12, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.